여러분 반갑습니다. 오늘 정말 귀한 손님 모셨습니다. CIA 분석가 출신이고 트럼프 대통령 일기 때에 국가안보실 또 보좌관 하셨고 지금은 또한 미국의 최고의 싱크탱크 중에 하나인 AFPI의 부소장을 역임하고 계신 플라이츠 모셔봤습니다. Hello guys, good morning. I'm here with Plaiche. He's a former CIA analyst and he served as a chief of staff for National Security Council for Trump's first administration. And he's right now vice chairman of FPI, one of the most outstanding think tanks in the US or throughout the world. Good to have you, sir.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so you're such an expert on foreign policy and military actions. So before we go into more detail, what are the President Trump's objectives of the Iran war?
That's a great question. President Trump agreed to this current war with Iran to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons. Now, the nuclear program was developing, but the immediate threat was that Iran was rapidly building up its missile arsenal. And according to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, by the end of this year, would have had an arsenal so large, it would have essentially been a missile shield that would have made efforts to stop Iran from pursuing nuclear weapons impossible by the end of the year. So that's why President Trump decided to begin this war on February 28. He actually has achieved the objectives of the war, and I think he plans to wrap it up in a couple of weeks.
Did U.S. Intelligence committees concluded that Iranian missiles could reach out to the U.S. territory very soon?
Well, it's pretty clear that Iran has missile ranges that far exceed what they claimed. Supreme Leader Khamenei said they did not have a missile with a range of over 2,000 kilometers. Then they fired a missile at the remote Indian Ocean island of Diego Garcia, almost 4,000 kilometers away, which puts Paris almost in range of their missiles. And if you count their space launch vehicles, and this is also something North Korea is doing, their space launch vehicles are really tests to develop ICBM. So I think within a few years, certainly by 2030, Iran would have an ICBM capable of hitting the United States.
Do you think North Korea provide some military assets to the Iranian region?
I think there's no question of that. We know that Iran's missile program is based on North Korean designs. In fact, in the 1980s, Iran paid North Korea to provide its first advanced short-range missiles. Since that time, both nations have been collaborating on missile technology. I don't know whether North Korea and Iran have been collaborating on nuclear technology, but I do know the father of Iran's nuclear weapons program on at least one occasion was in North Korea to witness a North Korean nuclear test. That suggests to me there's been serious collaboration on nuclear weapons between Iran and North Korea.
Do you think that the serious collaboration between the Iran and North Korean region began because of Russia or China?
I believe both rogue states were trying to develop nuclear weapons. They both were relying on A.Q. Khan, the father of the Pakistan nuclear program. And Khan got his start in building nuclear weapons for Pakistan based on assistance from China. There's no question about that. I also believe it's very clear that major advances in the Iranian and North Korean missile program over the last 15 years were greatly aided from assistance from Russia, North Korea, and possibly China.
Okay. So yesterday, President Trump announced ceasefire. Do you think this is the end of the war or beginning of the end?
Well, the major media, and look, I hope your viewers don't pay much attention to CNN and the New York Times because it's full of left-wing deception and propaganda. They're all saying that Trump backed down, that this is a win for Iran. Just bear in mind that just a week ago, that the Iranian government was saying they would never agree to a short-term ceasefire, and they did, because Trump made it clear that he was going to destroy their power systems, their power grid, if they did not agree. The problem is we've seen a lot of deception from the Iranians since that time. They apparently closed the Strait of Hormuz over the last 12 hours. They gave one set of possible points for a peace deal to the Trump administration that President Trump thought was something we could work with. And then they leaked an outrageous version to CNN. So there's a lot of deception going on right now. I don't know whether the ceasefire will hold up. I hope it does, and that we can move to a new phase of de-escalating this conflict and standing with the Iranian people to throw out this terrorist regime.
Got it. Many experts argue that President Trump wants regime change in Iran. Do you agree?
Well, I think the objective of this operation was fairly clear. The missile program, the nuclear program, but not regime change, but regime weakening the regime so the Iranian people can throw it out. I think that's something that really needs to be done. But unlike the second Iraq war, when the U.S. invaded and try to impose a new regime on Iraq, which failed. We're not going to do that. We're trying to create the opportunity for the Iranian people to take back their country.
So what are the President Trump's plan after the Iranian people rise up and take back their country?
Well, that's a good question because it's going to be difficult to overthrow this government. It concerns me that if the Islamist regime falls, it could be replaced by another armed group, maybe a radical group. I think there are plans within the US government and within Israel to try to help democratic groups, people in the Iranian diaspora, to establish a responsible democratic government. I don't know what those plans are, but I'm concerned that I don't know what the roadmap is from overthrowing this government and installing a democratic one.
Got it. So as you know, the current Iranian regime lasted like a half a century. But if this regime collapsed, what does it mean in context of history?
Well, I think it will be an incredibly historic event for global security. This regime has killed thousands of American soldiers through terrorism by providing weapons during the war in Iraq. It has sent assassination squads into Europe. It's trying to assassinate President Trump. So when people say that this was a war of choice by President Trump, no, Iran has been at war with our country for 47 years. It funds terrorist groups all over the world. It sent assassination squads into Europe, which is one reason why President Trump is upset that European states did not stand with us in this war. So overthrowing this destabilizing terrorist regime would be a truly historic event.
Okay, got it. So I want you to give us a more big picture. President Trump decided to capture Nicolas Maduro and deliver him to New York. And he decided to eliminate Ayatollah Khamenei. And he is willing to take back to Cuba. And he wants to liberate Cuban people. What does it imply to people in Korea and the people around the world?
You know, many people are arguing that the Iran war and the efforts against Maduro, who was a narco-terrorist leader, they've condemned it because they said, well, this violates international law because the U.S. did not get a UN Security Council to approve that. The Security Council is broken. There's no way to get past Chinese and Russian vetoes to do things. And concerning Maduro, the president is simply sick and tired of the huge number of illegal migrants coming into our country. And these migrants stem from instability in the Western Hemisphere. Getting rid of Maduro was an effort to stop that and stop the illegal drug trade, which was being sent into the U.S. I might add, concerning Supreme Leader Khamenei in Iran, the Israelis killed him, not the United States. But it is true that the U.S. and Israel began this operation on February 28th because apparently there was intelligence that Khamenei was holding a meeting with a large number of Iranian officials at the same time at his residence. And it's true, the U.S. and Israel took advantage of that, but it was not the U.S. that bombed Khamenei.
If the Iranian regime collapsed, would it have big impact to national security of Russia and China too?
I think so, because Iran is a proxy state for both countries. They use Iran to cause problems in the Middle East, certainly problems for the United States in the region. Iran is providing weapons for Russia in the war in Ukraine. And it's an important ally for China. China buys a huge amount of oil from Iran. If this government is overthrown, the new government will not forget that China has been propping up the Islamist regime in Iran for decades.
Some experts argue that President Trump decided to get involved in the Iran war because of global energy dominance for the U.S. Do you agree with that?
No, Trump said a while ago that his approach to national security includes stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And the intelligence that they were getting very close to a bomb was very strong in early 2023. And after the 12-day war, there was a ceasefire. The Iranian government resumed work on the nuclear weapons program. That led to the current war against Iran.
Okay, so let's move to the subject of North Korea. Nowadays, North Korea has developed more aggressive and more dangerous weapons aiming the U.S. and even they have capability to attack U.S. territory. And many experts assess that. After the Iran war, do you think that President Trump or the U.S. military will take any action to handle the Korean Peninsula issue?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I have a new book coming out on the subject titled North Korea, Nuclear Brinkmanship and the Oval Office. And it talks about American presidents for decades have underestimated the North Koreans, have been manipulated by them, how North Korea has cheated on agreements that they've made with the world. And frankly, they've had an incredible determination to pursue nuclear weapons. despite the fact that they claimed they weren't doing so, or they were slowing down the effort. Trump made some significant inroads in his first term in getting North Korea to stop testing nuclear weapons and a temporary halt on testing of missiles. There was a halt on testing of all missiles for about 9 months. No long-range missiles were tested into the Biden administration. I think that was good, and that's why Trump wants to resume bilateral diplomacy, personal diplomacy with Kim Jong-un. He would like to denuclearize North Korea, but I think he's going to do his best to promote stability. The problem is, the North Korean problem has been significantly worsened since Trump left office. A lot of this has to do with Joe Biden's incompetence. He just ignored North Korea, but it also has to do with the war in Ukraine. There's a strong relationship now between Russia and North Korea. North Korea is getting a lot of food and energy and support for its missile program from Russia. That's going to make it difficult to strike a meaningful deal on missiles or nuclear weapons with North Korea.
As you just said, the North Korea regime has become more dangerous. The rogue regime of North Korea will be really dangerous target, I think. While U.S. is concentrating military resources to Middle East right now, do you think China will take serious military action toward Taiwan or infiltrating to some important allies in Indo-Pacific area?
It worries me that China appears to be preparing for a possible attack on Taiwan. I don't think that the Chinese government has made that decision. I also don't think the Chinese military is prepared to do that. I do think it is still something that the government is seriously planning. President Trump's approach to China includes being tough with China on trade issues, on security issues, fentanyl, because it's providing fentanyl chemicals to Mexico, where the drugs are made and sent into the U.S., intellectual property theft, intelligence operations against the U.S. We need these things to stop, but at the same time, Trump wants to talk to the Chinese government. I think that's why we will see a very successful summit in Beijing, which Trump will use to lower temperatures, to lower tensions, and try to see whether we can even lower tension between Taiwan and China. I think if the U.S. can improve relations with China, it will be to the benefit of Taiwan.
Okay. Could you give us your final comments before we finish this interview?
Well, I had a very productive trip to South Korea this week. The South Korean people are so friendly. I met so many experts at the Asan Institute plenum here in Seoul. I just learned a lot about how concerned the South Korean people are about the war in Ukraine, the situation with China, the situation with North Korea. But what I try to assure them is that the U.S. alliance with South Korea is rock solid. President Trump is going to stand behind it, and we're so grateful to have an ally that's so important. And what I try to say in my presentations is that we need to build on this relationship. South Korea is the second largest shipbuilding nation on earth. It has a strong potential for expanding its ability to promote stability in the region, which is why I suggested that the Quad alliance of the US, Japan, Australia, and India should be made the quint to add South Korea to play a greater role in promoting stability in the Indo-Pacific. And I seem to get a good reception from my South Korean friends.
Okay. Can I give you one more question?
Sure.
Currently, the tension between Japan and China are rising up because of the military issues. What is your opinion of future relationship of Japan and China?
Well, the Japanese government is not going to be bullied by China. I think that that's really what the issue is here, that Prime Minister Takaichi has taken a hard line, that she's going to support Japanese interests. She's taking a Japan-first approach to her foreign policy. And she's not going to appease the Chinese. I don't think she's going to unnecessarily antagonize them. But I think China is trying to intimidate and antagonize nations in this region to do what they want. And we've seen this happen to South Korea, to Japan, to Australia. This is Japan's turn, I think, to stand up to Chinese aggression, Chinese intimidation, to defend their interests.
Okay. Thank you for the interview and thank you for the time. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.